Good morning, you cursed, and welcome to the Curse of Politics on Wednesday, Hump Day. We got Jenni Byrne here. We got Scott Reid with us, and we got Allison Smith from Queen's Park today. Good morning, Allison. How are you?
Good morning. Happy Wednesday. I had to double check to look at the top of my laptop to make sure I know what day it is, but it's Wednesday. And happening on Wednesday, actually, no, what happened on Tuesday? Whoa. As I'm sure you want to know.
Let's travel back in time.
Back in time. Well, as Jenny predicted, Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca, he talked up the 4-day work week plan that he has, and he discussed bringing back the basic income pilot. So that was his work-life balance stuff that he was discussing. Andrew Horwath was pledging money to repair Ontario's schools, and also talking about French language services and how she would make those better. Doug Ford celebrated his 4th union endorsement, labor union endorsement, by spray painting the words "Get It Done" on a wall. But it's actually a pretty interesting story, I think. I mean, I think the fact that 4 labor unions have endorsed the PCs might ultimately become, a bit of a story of this campaign. All of them, I believe, when they did so, have really talked up Labor Minister Monty McNaughton when they did so, and how much he's supported and listened to them. So I guess on that file, whatever the PCs have been doing over the last 4 years, which was giving a lot of money to skilled trades training, seems to have worked for them. And they're losing, unions that used to be part of Working Families Coalition, Working Families Coalition was the story of multiple elections here in Ontario. So that's pretty fascinating. Today, Del Duca is going to be in Toronto. He's also talking up affordability. So I think the Liberals might be listening to you, Scott and David. He's also going to sit down with the Toronto Star editorial board, ride a GO train, and then heads to London. Andrea Horwath is still out east. She's going to Kingston, talking about pharmacare and covering drugs by OPIP, and then going to Smiths Falls and Nepean. While she's gone, Doug Ford's going to be heading to her home turf of Hamilton, which, a labor city. So he's kind of he's grabbing a few of her, I don't know, he's not being shy when going after her constituencies right now. And he's going to meet with workers at Stelco. That's a big steelmaking plant where the PCs and the Trudeau Liberals have spent a bunch of money to I think, electrify or clean up the furnace there so that it's a little more green, or actually a lot more green.
The NDP aren't really displaying much of a sense of urgency there if they were talking about French language services yesterday, and now they're off to Nepean.
Smiths Falls.
Talk about whatever, Smiths Falls.
Why don't they just campaign on Pluto? Like, come on. They'd have no chance of winning in Smiths Falls. It's a wasted day, so,
And they have no chance of winning in Nepean either.
No. And they have no chance of winning any French seats. The French seat.
Maybe in the north.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they have France, Gélinas, and Nickel Belt. She's French.
All right, yeah.
In the north, right. Yeah. The French north, as we in downtown Toronto like to call it. I'm going to the French north. We summer there every year. We summer.
Hey, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm seeing something in Twitter that I'm not seeing in the news this morning. And that is, did Ford's people beat up a nurse yesterday, a personal support worker?
Beat up a nurse yesterday.
All over
Are
Twitter.
You talking about outside the debate?
Yes. Outside the debate, there were protesters and there.
Oh, it was the debate. It was 2 days ago. It wasn't yesterday.
Yeah, someone did get hurt. Someone did get hurt outside the debate, outside by Ford's bus. I don't know if anyone knows exactly what happened, but somebody did get hurt, and that happened right before I got there. So there were all the ralliers everywhere, the bus, then also sirens.
Keep talking, because Jenny's going to hurt me when you stop. So.
Okay. I don't think the PCs hurt anyone. I think that one rumor I heard, I don't know if this is 100% true, is that the nurses or the SEIU healthcare people were trying to block the bus from pulling up and like maybe got a little hit by it. But I don't know. I probably shouldn't even say that on the air because I don't
Maybe
know
got a little hit by it. Maybe got a little hit by it. Corey maybe drove his Ferrari over them a little.
Oh my God.
But just a little.
Yeah, I don't know. That's all hearsay from the media room that night, but I don't think it was that bad. But
okay.
I'm sorry if it was, I guess.
It's hard to trust Twitter. I don't know. It looked Agincourt on Twitter, but I'm sure it was less bloody.
With that, I'm gonna go before I get in any more trouble.
You're not the one in trouble. I think I'm in a lot of trouble.
Okay, listeners, you can find Queen's Park Today at politicstoday.news. And if you are a Parliament Hill watcher, click the tab for Parliament Today. It's our newsletter that covers all things on the Hill, including committees, as Scott joked about yesterday.
It was David, but I have a long catalog of committee jokes if you want me to unfurl it. So careful what you wish for.
I gotta go.
Bye, Allison. Thanks.
Bye.
So we've been talking the last little while here about our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and more specifically, how their world-leading technology and their compassion are inextricably linked in the way they do business. Driven by social purpose, TELUS doesn't just believe you can drive social change as part of a successful bottom line. They act it every day in caring for the environment, modernizing agricultural practices for better food outcomes, in bridging the digital divide, community giving, and in what I want to talk about today, healthcare. Health for Good is the name of a number of TELUS's community-centered programs that improve the way practitioners get critical care to the most vulnerable among us. And because I told you TELUS believes that what gets measured gets done, and I'm a bit of a data geek myself, here are some numbers that help tell that story. Last year, 4 new TELUS mobile health clinics were unveiled in Victoria, Vancouver, Toronto, and Niagara region. Partnering with local health organizations, these things deliver quite literally compassion on 4 wheels, a fleet of highly connected vans powered by TELUS health technology. Last year, they rolled into our most vulnerable communities and supported 35,000 patient visits, administering over 9,000 COVID vaccinations. Healthcare is just one aspect of TELUS's ESG commitments, environmental, social, and governance, and how they put the well-being of their customers, communities, and the planet first. You can read more about it all in their sustainability and ESG report at telus.com/sustainability. Hi, Jenny.
My coffee mug today?
Beautiful.
Oh, my. You have the David Herle.
The Herle mug. Yeah, I look good on that mug. Better than I do this morning. A week from today, what's happening a week from today?
Summer solstice, right? We gather, strip off our clothes, and dance to the pagan gods. What
That's
happens?
what we do first, but we're supposed to keep that quiet. After we're done that, we're going to do that event for the Toronto Region Board of Trade.
Oh, my word.
1 week today, we're going to be live in person together.
And naked at the Board of Trade. Textiles industry, get that border open. That's going to be fun. Board of Trade.
That is going to be a lot of fun. I'm so looking forward to seeing you. And Jenny, you know how Scott gets at these things, eh? After he's had a couple of beers, it's livens up the pod.
All jacked up, all crazy, Cookie Monster
but it's
eyes.
early. Like you're gonna have to start. You're gonna have to start like seriously day drinking.
But it's the Board of Trade. I'm very excited. I mean, I got to put my Sunday go to town clothes on. This is like the Board of Trade, man. This is a real people. We have to go there with learned thoughts and studied opinions.
But it's not going to be as boring as you might think a Board of Trade event would be, right?
Not with us.
I thought they just wanted us to be ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a Curse of Politics event, not a Board of Trade event. Although the Board of Trade, oddly enough, is happy to be associated with us. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. I'm sure there'll be some old friends there. Looking forward to seeing them. So that's a week from today. So
there's still 4 tickets left. After that, you have to sit in the kitchen. So get online and buy now, right?
Hey, I have a little bit of more from that Greg Lyle poll for us to chew on.
Perfect.
Good.
Going back to those demographic breakdowns we were looking at after last week's numbers, according to this week's poll, between 18 and 34 is 40 Liberal, 29 NDP, 20 Conservative. It's clear Liberal gains in that younger group at the expense of the NDP mostly. A little bit at the expense of the Conservatives. 35 to 54 looks a lot like it did last week, although a little bit weaker Conservative numbers. 35% Conservative, 27 Liberal, 26 NDP. NDP better numbers in that group than last week. And then 55 plus, you still got Ford sitting at 48%.
Ooh.
With the Liberals at 27 and the NDP at 17. 17. So that's still a big skew in the data, if you will, that again makes Ford's lead bigger than it actually looks. So if Greg's top line number was a 5-point Ford lead, it's actually probably more like 7 in terms of the ballot box, given these age breakdowns. The movement appears to be largely among women because Ford's lead among women has been wiped out. And women are now 33 Liberal, 33 Conservative, 26 NDP.
33, 26, is that what you said?
Yeah. Men are 39 Conservative, 29 Liberal, 20 NDP. To go back to that age thing, here's an interesting targeting exercise for you. Among working people in Ontario, it's 32 Liberal, 32 Ford Conservative, 23 NDP.
What's a working?
25 NDP.
What's a working people?
You're employed. You have a job.
Could be.
I'm not talking about class status. I'm talking about
that's right. Like,
you're not retired and you're not unemployed.
You could be the CEO of Maple Leaf Foods. You could be self-employed at home and watch video games all day.
Right.
Okay.
Retired.
Not using that example because it describes my life completely. It's just. But we do have to hurry up because I've got some friends and Halo waiting for me.
Retired people. 48% Ford PC, 29% Liberal, 15% NDP. Yep, go.
Well, we know what these numbers mean. It doesn't take a genius to interpret them, right? This gives a very strong structural advantage in terms of what voter turnout is likely to be, particularly in a campaign that doesn't seem to be particularly enthused or animated. So if you assume that voter turnout is going to be low, that get out the vote efforts are going to matter, all that works skews heavily towards the Conservative advantage. This is like a pointless point, but the numbers among 55 plus and among retired, the stranglehold that Ford has on those demos, that isn't. There was nothing inevitable about that, and it makes you wonder if you'd gone back in time and in the middle of the pandemic, really gone after, and this is something you've talked about forever, David, really gone after long-term care and really linked the Ford government with long-term care failures and really underlined motivation and really tried to say, these private sector, long-term care homes, the powerful people on their boards, the connections they have, the ins they have with this PC government, they're looking after those people. They're not looking after you. They're not looking after your mom or your dad or your aged aunt. I just wonder if more track had been laid, if more bruises had been delivered, if those demos would be softer than they are today. Because those numbers they're going to be really consequential in the next 2 weeks. And it feels to me like they're almost a reflection of a failed critique, a critique that didn't happen with power during the pandemic, that was just sitting there and offered the opportunity to rob Ford of those demos.
Well, that's possible, and that's I think there's lots of good reasons why why long-term care should be more front and center in the campaign. But I also think that when inflation gets high and people start to worry about the cost of living, that people on fixed incomes freak out about that, and that becomes very, very top of their agenda. And so when you are sending checks to people who are on fixed incomes, That's a pretty big deal. Like if you're a retired person that got that license sticker rebate check, that's found money that you probably feel you need. Jenni, we're all talking. What do you think?
Well, in terms of inflation, are people on fixed incomes not actually in a better position than people that are not? We saw this during COVID, right? So if you own your home outright, but boomers for the most part own their home. In a lot of cases, the mortgage is paid off. They're on a fixed income, so they're on a fixed pension. They're actually in a better place than what other demographics are in terms of having a job and worried about keeping that job.
Well, guys, we don't have to speculate. If we're talking about older people on a fixed income, we can just ask David for a more thorough examination of his views. Grandpa Herle, how are you getting by right now?
How do you actually even reach seniors these days, Jenni? Like tactically,
yeah.
How do you reach them as a group? Like, presumably the digital world is not as effective at reaching them. Are they still reading physical newspapers? Like, if you wanted to make a concerted effort to flip that group, how do you get to them?
If Ellen's going to get canceled, is there a way to reach older women?
But you don't think they're on Facebook? You don't think they're online?
Yeah, they're on Facebook. That's right. Yeah, they're on Facebook.
No, I don't think they're online like other demographics are, but I think they're online. Like to say they're like, sure, some aren't, but to say they're not online or they're not like paying attention to what's happening like everyone else, I think would be false.
Yeah, it's got to be Facebook, right? I mean, they are online. The older ladies are on Facebook, right? And they're putting up their Wordle score, and they're attaching photographs of.
Well, no, they're on Facebook because they want to see pictures of their grandkids.
That's exactly it.
Like that is why the boomer demographic is on Facebook. It's because it is a way to stay in touch with family members.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that however you do it, the other parties need to be focusing on that demographic and doing something to break that up. Because Ford gets 50% of the over 55 vote. It's not very difficult to see somebody losing.
But David, this is the problem the other parties have in terms of they are fighting on all fronts. They're fighting each other on the demographics, urban versus rural versus suburban, men versus women, age groups. They're fighting each other. So this isn't like they have a common enemy that is it's not like one versus one where, they can just solar like laser focus go to Ford. They're fighting each other in terms of demographics. So Ford is it's a good problem for Ford to have, that your opponents really, for the seats that for the most part they're going to pick up, they're fighting each other, not you.
Yeah, in general terms, but look at that. Look at the woman demo. Like that change is that harms Ford. That gives him a step back in 905. When he was leading among women, that's a real advantage for him in 905. So,
but he's still tied. He's still
doing pretty well.
But the trajectory
he's still tied, which is still higher than most conservative Ford or any other conservative leader is. The fact that he is tied with the Liberals is still,
for sure.
To me,
I'm just talking about relative to where he was prior to that, right? So, is there a trajectory? Is he going to be at 27% next week?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Is, are we looking at a trend line, or is this just a new reality that there's been an adjustment? We won't know that for a while. Why is it that in Ontario, if a person wants to tear down a wartime bungalow and build a mansion, they can? But if they were to turn that same bungalow into a multi-unit home, they'd find themselves in a sea of red tape. Our original sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association, says one way to fix the housing affordability crisis in Ontario is by ending exclusionary single-family zoning in high-demand areas. Currently, it is illegal in some neighborhoods to convert a single-family home into a townhome, duplex, etc., without a zoning bylaw change, which delays projects, drives up housing costs, and leaves people stranded without an affordable place to call home. Ending exclusionary zoning, like governments in California, Portland, and New Zealand have done would allow for the building of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes on lots traditionally zoned for single-family housing without unnecessary and lengthy case-by-case approvals. OREA is calling on the next government to use the Planning Act to implement as-of-right zoning in Ontario's highest demand urban neighbourhoods and put an end to local zoning rules that hold back the development of much-needed starter homes that people can afford. The current policies are at the heart of Ontario's housing affordability crisis in high-growth areas, and it's time the province steps in to modernize these archaic laws to best help middle-class families find a home in the community in which they grew up. You'll be hearing a lot more from OREA over the next several weeks about Ontario's housing affordability crisis and what can be done to fix it, because OREA wants to ensure every Ontarian has a fair shot at home ownership, and that starts with ending exclusionary zoning. Read OREA's plan at ahomeforeveryone.info. Hey, Greg asked some questions about the 413. I don't know nothing about this issue, to be honest. I don't drive up in that area of the world. But first of all, an awareness question. And I'm going to shout out to Greg because I love the way he asked this question. I'm going to steal this, I think. The 4 categories are, I know the details and can explain them to others.
Yikes.
8% of Ontarians.
That does not include the premier.
I am generally familiar, but cannot explain the details to others. 30%. I have heard about it, but don't know any of the details. 37%. I have not heard of the proposed highway before this survey. 19%. So this was one of the most talked about issues in the debate, right?
And this is province-wide, right?
This province-wide, and not that many people care about it. So when you ask support or opposition, 9% think it's a very good idea. 19% think it's a good idea. 15% think it's a very bad idea. 13% think it's just a bad idea.
Just bad. It's not very bad. It's kind of stinky, but not horrifying.
25% are neutral, and 19% don't know. So that's 44% in the don't know, neutral category.
So essentially 50% of people don't know or don't care about this. So,
right.
So a more...
And only 1 in 4 has a strong opinion one way or another.
But a province-wide poll on an issue like that means nothing.
Okay, so let's get to regions.
Perfect.
Oh.
Support.
You walked right into his punch, Jenny.
Yeah, no, Jenny, thank you very much for setting me up like that. In Toronto, 27% of people support the highway, and 28% of people oppose the highway, and 45% of people couldn't give a shit about the highway. In the rest of the GTA, 36% support the highway. 28% oppose the highway. 36% don't care. Do you want the rest of the province too, Jenny? No.
Well, do we care what the people in Windsor think of it?
No.
I'm so glad that Greg did this and that you're telling us, David, because I've been really wondering about this issue for like a while, particularly during the debate, right? Like it's illuminating, these numbers.
So, does the Conservative position on Highway 413 leave you more or less likely to vote for the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party? Much more likely to vote Conservative, 8%. Somewhat more likely to vote Conservative, 7%. Much less likely to vote Conservative, 19%. Somewhat less likely to vote Conservative, 8%. No difference, 50%.
That's GTA.
That's province-wide.
Oh, okay. Well, now let's do GTA demo on that, and then that tab will tell a different story, right?
GTA, Toronto. 11% are more likely to vote Conservative because of it. 25% are less likely to vote Conservative because of it. But I don't have a crosstab to know if those people were all Conservative haters to begin with, and it's just reinforcing their view. I don't know. But 25% are less likely to vote, and 52% will have their vote unchanged by the Conservative position on the highway. In the rest of the GTA, it is 22% who are more likely to vote Conservative. 27% are less likely to vote Conservative. 45% will be unmoved. So why are they running so hard on this thing?
Well, I think they obviously have numbers that the people that are more likely to vote Conservative are concentrated in ridings where they're where it's target ridings for them, where they're fighting the Liberals, fighting the NDP. Especially in the Peel region. So I can't think that they don't have that they do not have data to show this is a winning issue for them. And so and it are the 27% of people in Toronto less likely to vote for them, or the GTA area.
They weren't going to vote for them anyway.
Exactly. To your point, David. So I think that because there has been so much emphasis by the Tory campaign, by Doug's campaign on this, I have to believe that they actually have data to back up why they are doing this.
Yeah, I would think that too. I mean, it's not as big an issue as I expected. So it kind of raises the question on both ends about why the other parties think there's so much juice in opposing it. And I mean, why is it such a battleground? Really, it must come down to some ridings in the GTA that we don't have visibility to that are in play. Because otherwise, boy, it sure sucked up a lot of debate time for something that most people in the province don't care very much about.
Or the opposition parties have been sucked into this argument where it's actually great for Ford. They're actually talking about it. The more Del Duca and Horwath talk about the 413, the better it is for Doug.
I don't think the numbers tell us that. I think a couple of things. One, I think that it works for Doug in the sense that it's obviously a key component, a visible component in his overall building, growing narrative, right? Which they presumably have numbers on, and they know that as an overall metric, that thing is strongly in their favor. I think that these numbers, as we speculate, I think if you cross-tab it on intention to vote by party, and as you guys say in ridings, like I think about the York ridings, they're right on the bubble of this thing. I suspect that they're very much in play, and I suspect that those York ridings, people think that there's a play there. I think for the opposition, they probably detect that there's enough opposition to it that it gives them juice. And secondly, I bet there's another layer of interpretation, which is they've likely grouped this thing. And because look at the way they talk about it. They don't talk about, I want to cancel the 413. They talk about, I'm going to cancel the 413 and prioritize schools instead. So my guess is that their demo is not just riding oriented, but I'm guessing like a bunch of women in the GTA. And they're saying if they can deposit that trade-off in people's minds, maybe that worked for them. And that's why they're working so hard to try to get that thought. Of course, that's a more sophisticated logic that you have to get people to hear, digest, and approve of. But I think these numbers, they're interesting because I bet when you party tab them, it tells you why both sides think this issue could play to their advantage. And now you've got an execution battle on, like a message execution battle as to who can get their message out and heard by the right people. But, I look at those York ridings, I think, with the numbers that Greg is telling us, those York ridings are like absolute battlegrounds, right? They could go liberal, could go conservative. And so an issue like this probably plays in a monster way there.
Right. Well, I mean, that's GTA obviously always a key battleground and remains a key battleground for this thing. But Ford is in pretty good shape as long as he doesn't get a stronger challenge in the regions, right? I mean, because he's going to do well enough in the 905. But he's not going to get swept out of the 905 in any circumstance. So he's going to do well enough in the 905 that with the weakness of the challenge he's facing outside of the GTA across the province, that he's in pretty good shape to form a government, even with declining GTA numbers, I would think.
Yeah, So here's, I wonder if an advantage for the PCs is the timing of the debate. It was a relatively early all leaders debate. We're not getting another leaders debate. And it comes relatively early with more than 2 weeks. You know, is today Thursday? No, tomorrow. So tomorrow's 2 weeks to election day, right?
We've already discussed the fact that today is Wednesday, Scott.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so we'll edit that out. But you know, I think it isn't so much as, well, what if the debate went poorly? You'd have time to recover. But it's almost like there's not another natural intervening event in this campaign. So if you're the PCs, your message to your opposition parties is, I'm going to go on cruise control right now, because if I can freeze the numbers as they are, that's okay. So it's on you guys to make an issue, to make people care, to penetrate, to alter votes. And so I don't know how much they have in the tank in terms of money for advertising. I don't know how much they have in the tank in terms of, shocking interventions, war room stuff. But you look at the Liberals and you sort of say by these numbers, well, they've done a good job of breaking away from the NDP. But if they want to compete for government, they've got to have a second gear. They have to have a post-debate play. And that's what it's going to come down to.
They may also inevitably need help from the NDP in the Southwest and in the North, right? Because the Liberals are not going to take seats in those places. They need the NDP to be a stronger competitor, don't they, Jenny?
Yeah, no, 100%. 100% they do. And if you look at the numbers, especially in the North, the NDP are down. Doug's doing very well in the North based on Greg's numbers and other numbers that we've seen out. And I know the Conservative campaign feels pretty bullish about it. So you absolutely, it's a complete opposite dynamic than what you would have federally normally. So you absolutely need the NDP to do better than what they are doing, what they're doing right now. But this is why you're going to see, so to Scott's point, we are 2 weeks tomorrow into the election campaign. So we're 15 days as of today. So if you're sitting there and you're going seat by seat, it might feel good to go after Doug if you're the Liberals or NDP. But at the end of the day, if 90% of the seats you're fighting are actually seats where you need to take from the NDP or Liberal, depending on which campaign you're looking at it, it becomes, how futile is it if you continue to go after the Tories when it's actually not going to change the seat count?
Well, they're in slightly different positions, aren't they, Jenny, in the sense that I presume that here's the issue for the Liberals. The Liberals want to forget about Toronto now and move on to the GTA and engage wholly in the GTA with Ford and try to get Ford's numbers down more in the GTA. But the NDP are looking at, again, existential crisis. They will probably be retreating to Toronto to try to save incumbents and fighting hard in the city of Toronto against the Liberals. So the Liberals are going to be engaged in a fight they don't want in Toronto while they're trying to engage Ford in a fight in the GTA. And they get squeezed on those issues. And that's where things like the 413, right, come into play, because the Liberals have to be opposed. You have to shout your opposition to the 413 in Toronto to combat the NDP, but you don't want to be shouting it in the York ridings, as you're talking about. So,
well, and that's the great thing that the Tories have right now is they have lumped their opponents into one. So for the most part, the NDP and the Liberals, for them in terms of at least air war, are one and the same. It's not the case for the Liberals and the NDP. So it's actually a very good place for the Tories to be, and it makes it for a very challenging place, especially for the Liberals to be.
I'm not convinced that it's the most challenging for the Liberals. I think the NDP have got a real problem. I think the Liberals can bisect their efforts. They can make Toronto a ground war effort and keep Del Duca in 905 and the upper portion of 416 in terms of both his presence as leaders tour and their overall messaging, their ads. They can direct a lot of those kinds of air war resources toward 905 and try to keep it as a ground war in downtown Toronto, and hopefully that pulls out the trick for them. The NDP, as you say, David, have a real problem. We're going to see them in the next few days dedicate resources to Toronto, which is probably the wrong choice, but you can't abandon incumbents, so they're going to be put in that awkward spot. And
you can't abandon incumbents.
It's at this point in the campaign, though.
It'll be hard for them.
It's early.
I'm saying. And you're going to see them
not
turn
that
on the
early.
Liberals.
It's 2 weeks. That's like a nanosecond in campaigning in politics.
But you're going to see them turn on the. You're going to see the NDP message, and this is why I do think they're different. My prediction would be the next few days, the Liberals will continue to talk about Ford, and they won't mention the NDP very much. Whereas the NDP are going to almost be forced to turn their focus on Liberals. They're going to have to, but they ought to be campaigning in Southwest and the North and the East, and trying to Southwest and the North at least, Southwest and the North, and trying to fight Doug too.
I just think that the Toronto thing is such a big deal for them to abandon it now. Jenny, I agree with you. In a pure targeting sense, you should be making those decisions now. But for them to make the decision now that Toronto's over is a big decision with lots of consequences for the future of their party, too. It's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
It could create...
but that's... yes, campaign decisions.
For those of you listening on the radio, Jenny was just looking at me like, you weak, pathetic, massive tissue.
Like, why don't you go to the bathroom, take down the jar where you keep your nuts, and screw them on, Herle. It's a campaign.
I was not. I was just listening.
But you're right, David. I think it's really tough, isn't it? And it explodes a bunch of internal. Like, it's not easy within the culture of the campaign to sort of say, okay, guys, sorry, this is the ruthless, bloodless decision we're making. And all those incumbents, they'll go, I'm calling everybody all the time now.
Well, first of all, if it's a normal party at all, and I don't know that it is, but if it's a normal party at all, there's lots of internal shit about Horwath going on in that party right now.
100%.
And people are thinking futures, and some of those people thinking futures hold downtown Toronto seats. And they don't think their future is going to be as bright if they don't hold a seat post-election.
Right. Yeah. Hey, Jenny, can you bring us up to speed on how, I do think this union business is fascinating about the private sector unions lining up behind Ford and the PCs. First of all, I'm interested in whether they're lining up behind Ford or whether they're lining up behind the PCs. I wonder if it's one of those Ford things. But I know that there was a specific policy reason why LiUNA did it in the last campaign. But there are, I think, 3 other private sector unions who've joined LiUNA in this campaign and endorsing the Ford PC.
Yeah, the Boilermakers. Yeah, there's others. Listen, I think this is a lot that this is a Doug thing. I know the unions have mentioned Monty McNaughton when they've done their endorsements. I think this is a very big this is a Doug thing because if you look at the same unions spent a ton of money in previous campaigns, especially the 11 and the 14 campaign, spending money to go after Tim Hudak and the PC party. So I think this is more of a Doug thing than what it is a conservative thing. But the Conservatives, you saw Doug do an announcement yesterday in terms of organized labor. So it's obviously something they feel very, very bullish about. And if you're also the NDP and the Liberals who have benefited from the support of trade unions in the past, you're probably sitting there going, well, fuck, like
where are my door knockers?
Well, LiUNA was never going to support Del Duca. I think that's what you were leading to in terms of the the Carpenters Union versus LiUNA, which is part of the reason why, of course, obviously LiUNA supported us, the PC party in the 2018 campaign. But you've got to be, if you're in the war room, if you're sitting around around the table, you're like, fuck, this is not normal. This is not normal Ontario politics happening when you have major unions out on the hustings for the PC party.
Can I dredge this back to? I remember when Boris Johnson won in England, there was a lot of excitement around a new conservative model that he had broken through in historic labor ridings, and that the Conservatives were the party of the working person again, not the elite party, but the party of the working person. There was a lot of excitement about that. And I see reflections of that in the campaign that Mr. Poilievre is running for the federal leadership. And I see, obviously, this manifestation of it here. it makes me wonder whether there's a mindset now in the conservative movement about getting working people and about the labor movement, et cetera, that's different than what it used to be.
Well, I don't think so. I think, but it's like the previous campaigns, if you looked at it, some have won and some have lost. Aaron O'Toole, for the most part, campaigned trying to reach out to union voters specifically, and so and that failed. I think that for the most part, if your policies, and I actually think this is different than provincially, because of course you have Doug that do have the union leadership that are out supporting him, and it may be happening that way because the union members actually, they've brought the union to that. And I think that the problem that, like, for example, Aaron O'Toole had is that he had no policies that were actually out appealing to union members. See, people that are members of unions, it's not like they don't pay more for gas and they're not paying more for the groceries and they're not concerned about everything else that's happening in the world. Like it's not like they're the monolithic, like if you're a union, you're going to be here and you don't have any concerns outside of being a member of the union. And I think that's where Doug is doing well, and why other campaigns that are talking about issues that affect people are doing well among people that happen to hold union cards.
I think it's a real mistake. I have no way of quarreling with your analysis. I assume that you're right, that Doug is particularly driving it, combined with policies that then make sense. So he gives them a little bit more entree into those organizations, and then their policies back it up. And Monty works the ground hard and builds relations, and all that builds up, and you get 4 endorsements during the middle of an election campaign. But I think it would be a big mistake and a dangerous mistake, for the other two parties to go, well, this is just a Doug thing, so we don't worry about it. Once Doug's gone, then things can return to normal. I would be really, really freaked out by this if I were the NDP and the Liberals, and in particular I know New Democrats love it when I talk for them, but I've been banging the desk for 2 years saying, start with the unions. Start with the unions. When you were sort of stuck at 22%, you're wandering around going, how do I build a coalition? Recapture the union movement. Get back now. First of all, it carries you in a more populist lunch bucket dialogue rather than just talking about sort of your genuine, all progressive issues, and get that going. And that's gone. So those private sector unions now are basically saying we already decamped in previous elections, the Liberals. We're now decamping further. That's a big problem. They got to recapture them. And for the Liberals, you don't want to watch those guys go away. Like, you got to get them back. And I'd want to scramble like mad to get them back.
But is that not a problem for after the election? Like if you're sitting in Horvath or Del Duca's ward, and you're not worried about the future of the Liberal Party or the NDP relationship with the unions, you're just trying to get through the next 15 days and making sure you win as many seats as possible.
You're for sure.
No, but I think it's a huge talking point for Ford during the campaign. Yeah. Like, I just think it's a wonderful talking point for Ford.
Of course it is.
Yeah, and putting up the OFL to say, see, it isn't true. That doesn't, it's almost like you missing the fucking point kind of territory, right? So,
well, it's also kind of helpful that they're all private sector and that the public sector unions are all lined up against them. That's not a bad division for them.
That's right. It creates its own narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys, I think the show is over. So it's time. I think the show's over. It's time for our blessing and our curse.
Go, Jenny, go.
I don't even know what to say. Well, I guess a curse will be for to follow up on what we just stopped talking about. The curse would be to the Liberals and the NDP. They've lost a core constituency in terms of union support, and so when you're looking at unseating a government that has now gained the support that you have had for literally decades, and you're also fighting on another front, both of them, not just the government, but you're fighting each other. It's a huge factor, not just in terms of the air war, but as we talked about before, the people that are going out and knocking on doors and making phone calls. It's a huge curse for the other parties, and we'll see how much of a factor it is at the end of the day. But as David, I agree with you. I think in terms of campaign dynamics, in terms of communications, it's been very good for Ford. Let's see what it translates in terms of votes on June 2nd.
Yeah, cool. Scott? What do you got?
My blessing is really narrow, and Jenny's going to make fun of me. My blessing goes out to the Liberal War Room. I thought that yesterday, it's going to sound like really, really precise, but they picked up on a line from the debate where Ford, in his usual hyperbolic way, talked about Stephen Lecce as the best, greatest education minister we've ever had in Ontario, right? Because that's what he says all the time, right? That's the greatest soup I've ever tasted. Oh my God, this is the greatest weed I've ever had. And so and that's saying something, folks. But the War Room issue, it's one of these chicken shit things you toss out there. It's, what sticks to the wall sort of thing. They took the Lecce thing and then they sort of said, here's like the list of Lecce's sins. And you know what? It got some media pickup and it's a game of inches. And do I think that turns around the election? No. But boy, you come out, you got some better polling. You're at the halfway point. Feels like you've separated from the NDP in a positive way. Then, you feel like, they feel like they did okay in the debate. You get a little bullshit press release. It sort of doesn't just talk among yourselves. It generates a little media. You get a little hit in, starts to get some starch in your sheets, some steam in your stride. You start to feel like, hey, fuck, we can mix this thing up. So good to them. Keep it going. And, you got to generate momentum. That's like I said earlier, little things like that have a rallying effect within the headquarters.
Well, this next week is an enormous week in the campaign because the last week has its own weird dynamics to it. So if you're really going to change things up, this is the week to do it, which takes me to my blessing, which goes to Michael Balagas, who's running the NDP campaign. Michael Balagas is a smart guy, and he's a good guy, and he's got a really shitty job this week. He's got to hold everybody's hand inside that party and keep them confident at the same time that he's retooling the whole thing. And he's got to come up with a new strategic approach. He's got to come up with new resource allocation. He's got to do that while keeping the leader performing strongly on the tour without breaking her confidence, keeping the team together while starting to move some resources around. This is a shitty, important week for Mike Balagas. And having been in that spot, thinking about you, brother.
Wait, that was a blessing?
Yeah. My blessing goes out to him. He's got to do that this week.
Listen, Padre, don't bless me ever. Holy smokes.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association. And I'd like to thank Allison Smith of Queen's Park Today and Greg Lyle of Innovative for their ongoing, interesting research that they're giving us in this campaign. Jenny, Scott, we'll see you tomorrow, but a week from tonight, we'll be drinking together, and I look forward to that.
I'm excited.
We'll be talking trade.
Well, that's what we talk when we get together anyways.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
No
trade and boards. Boards and trade. Boards of trade.
Yeah, we love boards.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right.